Hi everyone, Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, here with a very special guest on a very special video talking about a very special filly, and that is Thorpedo Anna and whether or not she can beat the boys on Saturday in the Travers Stakes. But before we get to that, make sure to press this like button and subscribe to the NYRA Bets YouTube channel to get all of our race previews, full card analyses, Travers Day spotlights, live racing live streams, handicapping and betting tutorials, and so much more. But joining me today is my colleague at NYRA Bets, Kaylie Shapiro. Kaylie, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me about Thorpedo Anna today.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. And there's two reasons I wanted to have Kaylie on. One, she's a really sharp handicapper. You've been around the sport most of your life. You've been around horses most of your life. In particular, the sales, the pedigree side of things, you really are invested in that space. And I had a lot of fun learning from you a couple of weeks ago when we were over at the Facing-Tipton sale. That was a lot of fun. But you also happen to be Thorpedo Anna's #1 fan.
I absolutely am Thorpedo Anna's #1 fan. I think that there's rarely horses that I get super emotional being around or that make me feel, a lot of things being around. And around her, I get very much choked up. And she's a very special horse.
She is. She exudes that sort of personality. We saw her, we'll talk a little bit more about it later, but we saw her on Sunday in the paddock. And she definitely was exuding a certain charisma, a certain energy that, I was in the paddock for fierceness training. He didn't exude that energy. I'll tell you that much. So she definitely has the it factor, whatever that is. And you've been on her for a while. You've really liked her going back to that Kentucky Oaks. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, first Saturday, what is it that you really see that impresses you about her that you think it really gives her a big chance on Saturday in the Travers?
I truly believe that we have not seen the best of this horse yet.
Yeah.
Every single time that she runs or she works, she's not fully being asked ever. If anything, she's given her head a little bit in her works, to see, what they're working with. But everything that she does is very much effortless. And she's just an exceptional filly that we have not seen the best of yet.
Absolutely. No, and that's one thing. We'll show a couple of race replays on this, and you'll see most of her wins are pretty much so wrapped up. Brian's just keeping her focused pretty much so down the stretch, making sure she stays to task. But she's a really impressive one. And obviously the decision to run her against the boys is one that trainer Kenny McPeek has made, but he's not a stranger to this decision. He made this decision a few years ago with another filly, Swiss Skydiver. He ran her against the boys in the Bluegrass as well as in the Preakness. She won that Preakness. You brought up a point that speaks to McPeak's confidence in her clearly, and he wouldn't put her in this spot if he didn't think she was ready.
Right. He could have just sent her to the Alabama and she would have won easily. And we would have all been guessing who's going to run second. And that would have been the race. But instead, he's opted to send her to the Travers against all the boys. And, he's very proud of this filly that he has. He's not going to put her in any place where she's going to embarrass herself or she's not going to run a good race. So at the very least, she's going to run a good race.
Yeah.
And, I truly believe that she has every capability to win.
And one of the things that I'm so interested about McPeak, and you can shed some light on this because of your background, is, McPeak has this uncanny ability to find horses that are kind of overlooked by other people at the sales. They don't have the flashy pedigree, maybe. It doesn't jump off the page. It's not Sierra Leone, who's $2.3 million, sired by Gunrunner. This is a daughter of Fast Anna. She went for $40,000 at sale. You go back to Swiss Skydiver, $35,000 at sale. These were not expensive horses, and yet they ended up dominating a sport. How does McPeak continually find these types of diamonds in the rough?
Well, McPeak has an exceptional eye when he's at these sales. He's able to find diamonds in the rough and horses whose pedigree doesn't jump immediately off the page. He's looking for very nice individuals, and he found that with Thorpedo Anna. She was a $40,000 filly as a yearling at Keeneland. And, when he looked at her, he definitely thought of her as a very nice individual with a lot of potential, because that's what you're buying as a yearling. You're buying the potential and what they can develop into. And he's done a great job with that in the past. And, he did it again with her. Clearly, she's already done her job and she's already accomplished. So,
she's already paid for that $40,000 and way more than that. But one of the things you've talked to me about before is that he also tends to look at kind of maybe potentially productive broodmares and kind of a dam side pedigree that, like you said, doesn't jump off the page, but her dam is, sired by Uncle Mo. And, so there's something there. And I want to say the other offspring was a winner at 2 years old. So there's something there that may get overlooked by other people.
Of course, Uncle Mo is an exceptional broodmare sire,
Yeah.
and she has a great pedigree. And, you know,
those are the things that, you know, McPeak is going to look for
exactly
when trying to make a little bit of money, rather than, oh, this is a multiple graded stakes winning dam sort of a thing. So listen, it's always fun. Kenny is a big personality. He has a lot of confidence in this filly. He called her a grizzly bear before the Oaks, and she backed him up, and she's backed him up every step of the way. But let's talk about some of those races that she's been in. And one of the things, anybody who's watched any videos of mine know that one of the things I harp on is horses that overcome obstacles. I always like a horse that overcomes an obstacle. In other words, I don't really like fierceness, but I like horses that do have that ability. And she's shown that the last couple of times out, because even though she's won easy, they haven't been the easiest trips necessarily.
Right.
And so in the Coaching Club America Oaks is kind of a prime example.
So in the start of this race, you can see that she loses so much ground because she hops out of the gate, you know, not too much ground where it was detrimental, but a decent amount where she had to make a bit of a run up to get a good spot to be competitive in the race still. But there was no doubt that she was able to do that. She wasn't even encouraged to do so. She just kind of knew her job, and she ran up and she saved her ground. And
yeah, that was an impressive effort. And it was one that, you know, I'll show another angle of it from the side. You see, to Kaylie's point, just how many lengths she's kind of giving up there, 3-4 lengths at the beginning. And then to your point, Brian's not asking her for anything. I mean, he's just along for the ride, and she just knows, I got to go. I got to get up to the spot. And what I think is particularly impressive is a lot of times when horses miss the break a little bit, there tends to be an overexertion. And, okay, we got to get up there. We got to get up there. We got to get our spot. And then you turn for home and you flatten out a little bit. Well, there was no flattening out with her turning for home. She pulled away from this field pretty easily.
Right. And you can see the way that she's coming down the stretch here, and her ears are pricked, and, you know, he's not really asking still all that much. Of course he is, but not nearly as much as the horses that are behind her. Look at Candide and how hard she's being asked. And I was the favorite going into the Alabama, and she can't even get close to Thorpedo Anna, who's being asked a fraction of the amount that the other horses are. And
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and Brian's really just keeping her straight, showing her the crop, not really, you know, pressing her too much for that, and still able to win very easily. Now, the race before that Coaching Club, though, she had some obstacles that we didn't even know about until after the race, which was she lost a shoe during the race. Talk a little bit about, like, what does that do to a horse? I mean, that can really throw your balance off. I mean, I imagine trying to run outside with one sneaker on, one sneaker off. It's probably not going to be very successful. So it was really something that she overcame that.
For a lot of horses, of course, it could really affect them losing a shoe. They're going to be a little bit off balance. But for a horse like her, doesn't matter at all.
Absolutely. And here she is in that race without the shoe, and she's turning for home and just dusts right by Just FYI and just pulls away from this field.
And she made Just FYI look like she's not even a contender. And Just FYI is a freakishly good filly as well. So that tells me a lot right there.
And the horse coming up on the far outside that you'll see with the kind of white blaze, who comes up for third, is Power Squeeze. And that's, of course, the horse that we just saw Saturday win the Grade 1 Alabama.
Right.
And look how easy Thorpedo Anna's wrapped up basically here and has her beat by 7 lengths.
And most notably, her size compared to the rest of the fillies. She's way bigger than them, and everything comes much easier to her than it does to the rest.
It really does. And this gets to something you and I saw her in the paddock on Sunday. And she just looks bigger. She just looks more physically developed than the fillies we saw the day before in the Alabama. And it was pretty noticeable that she is not just a big filly, but, you know,
a big horse.
Yeah, she's a big horse. I mean, you think she's going to fit in with the boys on Saturday?
I definitely do. And it's going to be really interesting to see her in the paddock next to everyone. I think she'll fit right in. And I don't think that she'll be intimidated in that paddock with the boys.
No, there will be no intimidation. She's got a personality to herself. And one of the races that actually brought her onto the national scene, obviously, was that victory in the Kentucky Oaks as well. And that was a front-running ride that day in the slop. And Brian Hernandez Jr. got her out there, got her up front. And again, turning for home, it's kind of the same song where, yes, she's being asked because, of course, a horse is going to get asked. But, I mean, really, compared to the rest of the field, she's exerting a fraction of the energy.
And she's doing it in the slop, and that's what makes it even more impressive. Here you see everyone else. This is a big group of very talented fillies, the best fillies in the country running up against her. And here she's still clearly the best. And there's no doubt, even at the beginning of the race, there was no doubt that she was going to win. So,
right. No, she was, and she just took off. And one of the things that's so interesting about her is, when Brian does go to the crop, he goes to the crop exactly once. In other words, she knows what she needs to do. She's a racehorse and she likes to run. And he gives her one tap and see you later. She's off.
And she always finishes with gas left in the tank. And that's the big thing, especially when you're talking about getting 1.25 miles. You compare her to some colts that, don't really finish with gas left in the tank. Yeah. She always does. And that's what makes her different.
No, that's 100% true. I think in particular, you think of a horse like Fierceness, who I think a lot of us feel it might be distance compromised at 1.25 miles. And usually at even 1.8 miles, that's kind of like, okay, that's about all we got left. Like, we don't really have much more. I mean, the Jim Dandy was a prime example. Yes, he beat Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone went right by him in the gallop out, though. I mean, he didn't really want much more than 1.8 miles that day. So, she's won, plenty of gas in the tank and hasn't really been overexerted to this point. Now, listen. We touched on it a little bit. She was there in the paddock on Sunday. There was such buzz around her being in the paddock on Sunday. Talk to me a little bit about just what you saw in the paddock from her personality, and kind of how ready she is for this race on Saturday.
Well, I've been going out and seeing her early in the morning since, kind of the beginning of when those works have been posted publicly, where you can, when and where she's going to work. And every single time I see her, she looks better and better. And notably, when we saw her in the paddock on Sunday, she just looked ready to go. She wanted to race that day. They even went to touch the blanket that was on her and pulled it back a little bit. They weren't taking it off, and she immediately just buffed up and was ready to go. And, she looks and she works every single camera that's in that paddock, and she looks at you right in the eye. And, she has a big personality, and that she has a great mind, and she has a lot of heart, and she just wants to run.
She does. And I will say, I got a bunch of pictures of her, and I thought, hey, I got a lot of great pictures of her. And then I realized everybody got a lot of great pictures of her, because she looks square at every single person she passes by that has a camera up. And so she's got ears were pricked. She was ready to run on Saturday. And and that last work was quite impressive as well. The 59-4, she was under a tight hold for that work. And we just talked earlier today to our colleague, Darwin Vizcaya, who does a lot of stuff for NYRA Espanol. And he was saying he was in the paddock. He saw everybody. I said, who was the most impressive? He said, Thorpedo Anna. I mean, she really does look the part in this race. But let's talk a little bit about this race, because there's some interesting dynamics here. She drew the number 1 hole. Now, it's a relatively short field, only 8. It's not like drawing the number 1 hole in the Kentucky Derby, where you're going to get a whole slew of horses crashing down on you on the inside. But what is your thoughts on that number 1 post position and kind of what it does to her chances on Saturday?
I'm not concerned about it. I wasn't jumping up and down with excitement when she drew the one hole, but I really don't think that it's going to make a big difference for her, honestly. And honestly, I think it's going to set her up to be able to save up a bit of ground, which is going to be the smartest thing for her to do here. And clearly Brian Hernandez is completely capable of giving her that ride. She has no immediate early speed to her right. She has Sierra Leone that is going to break last. And then all the speed is really on the outside. You have Fierceness and Dornock and Fierceness at the end. And those horses are kind of going to be in my opinion, in competition with themselves in the beginning to fight for the lead. While she's just going to find a nice comfortable spot, particularly on the rail, sitting in 3rd or 4th. And she's going to be able to rate, and she's going to be able to make a run up at the end when the others are tiring out. That's genuinely how I see the race playing out.
I think that's the way you got to draw it up, because I don't think she wants to necessarily try to gun it to the front. I don't think that's the right move, especially with a horse like Dornock right there. I agree with you. I'd let Dornock and Fierceness wear each other out a little bit up front, sit that pocket trip, save all the ground. We saw Brian Hernandez Jr. do it with Mystic Dan. He saved every inch of ground in that Kentucky Derby, and that made the difference, because it was that much of a difference between him and Sierra Leone. But, he traveled a lot less distance because of it. So she's going to get that inside rail trip. You mentioned Sierra Leone, horse that is going to be a little bit off slow. That's going to give Brian that room. She's not going to feel pressured. She's not going to suddenly feel somebody else coming in on her or anything like that. She's going to be able to hold that inside rail position in that race. And let's talk a little bit more about the general dynamics of the race, because there's going to be a fair amount of speed in this race. And so when you look at this race in general, I know you're all in on Thorpedo Anna, but who are the other horses or two that you're really keyed in on that you think could run a big race here?
Well, the race really sets up for Sierra Leone at the end of the day. If you're looking at the pace dynamics, it's pretty clear that this can be his race.
Yeah.
But the big difference between her and Sierra Leone is that he's going to come from the back of the pack and he's going to make a big run up at the end, and he's going to either just miss or he's going to get there, and that's going to be the way it's going to go. But if she's able to make a little move at the top of the stretch and get up front, she has all the tools to be able to outrun them and win.
That's a great point about Sierra Leone having to, he's a dynamic runner. And you point out, you always love to point out on the videos, he runs with his head down. Like he puts his head down. He's like, all right, I got to go. And he's dynamic, but you're right. He's kind of gotten a reputation the last couple of times out of coming up just short. It's like, are you going to get there this time? And there's not a lot of margin for error with Sierra Leone. Like he either gets there or he doesn't. And he's not like Fierceness, who can sometimes win by a dozen or lose by a dozen. But with Sierra Leone, it really is hit or miss. I know another horse you're high on is Dornick. He's a stubborn horse. He's one I like a lot from a personality standpoint. And I think reminds me a lot of Thorpedo Anna.
Yeah, definitely. Dornock is just a hard fighting horse. I think what really impressed me with him was his trip in the Remsen, where Sierra Leone kind of got in front of him and he was like, nope, and fought right back and got there. And that, when you think about, Sierra Leone is a phenomenal horse. Every stride of his is like two of another's. And when you think that Dornock was able to fight back and win that race, that's what makes him super impressive. And obviously he's coming off of Belmont and has to win, and he's in great condition. He's a hard trying horse. He's another one with a lot of heart and a great mind. And, he does scare me. He's a fast horse too. And, that's,
we'll have to see the way the track plays on Saturday as well. Is it playing to front end speed, et cetera? That's something to keep in mind during the Belmont Stakes Racing Festival up here. Front end speed tended to do really well. But Dornick's an interesting horse because I remember, his Fountain of Youth was not particularly impressive. And I remember somebody pointed out to me that he had his ears flicking around all over the place. And it was like he was just like looking for someone to like run against. Like he kind of likes to be challenged. And that's what he gets when Sierra Leone tries to go by, when Mindframe has tried to go by the last couple of times. Fierceness is going to apply that pressure to him. Horses like Batten Down and Unmatched Wisdom are probably going to press a little bit as well. Then Thorpedo Anna. So he's going to have to face a cavalcade of horses coming at him. He's a hard one to bet against. He's your morning line favorite at 5-2. I don't know if I love that price on a horse in this deep of a field, but certainly we'll see. Now, there was a long shot that you were a little bit interested in as well, which was the other Chad Brown.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if he'll be much of a long shot on race day. I guess we'll see. But definitely when I'm playing these exotics, I'm going to put Thorpedo Anna, of course. I'm gonna bet her to win, of course. But underneath her in a little box, I would put Sierra Leone, Dornock, and Unmatched Wisdom. He's another horse that's just going to keep improving. And
he's an interesting horse because Chad really was high on him before he ever even ran in the Curlin. And he's one that, probably hasn't run his best race yet, could still continue to improve.
Right.
He's going to be a really tough one to get around. But the thing about both him and Batten Down, it's going to be the trip. Can they win from off the pace? Because I don't think they're beating Dornick and Fierceness into that first turn. Right. And so now you're going to have to do something you haven't necessarily done before. And then, oh, by the way, it's just 1.25 miles as well. It's just no big deal. Right. So listen, Kaylie, I appreciate you coming on and chatting with me about this. And I wanted to ask you a question in kind of closing of what would it mean for this sport, or what does it even mean for her to be entered in this race? And then what would it mean for her to be the first filly to potentially win this race since 1915?
Well, it's going to be historic if she wins. Clearly, it's been a while since the filly has won the Travers, but I think if anyone can do it, it's her. And like we talked about, she's only going to be set up for success. That's obviously what Kenny McPeek is setting her up for, is success. And I have nothing but hope in her that she can really make history and beat these boys on Saturday. But for the sport, it's a very exciting thing, even just the build up of it, and the fact that she's even a participant in the race is an accomplishment clearly of her and Kenny McPeek, and the excitement around it is just phenomenal. And we're watching history in front of our eyes, even if she doesn't win, which I think she will, but even if she doesn't, we're gonna see a horse race, and that's the most exciting part about it.
It's going to be a race. There are two great races on the Saturday card, in my opinion. There is this race, and there's the H. Allen Jerkins. The H. Allen Jerkins is just a stupidly good race.
Right.
And you and I nerded out over that when the fields were drawn. But this is going to be a horse race. You have so many good horses, so many ascending horses in this race. I got one final question for you. Are you wearing pink on Saturday?
Oh, of course. I'm wearing all pink on Saturday.
I'm going to have a tough time spotting you because I think there's going to be a lot of people wearing pink on Saturday. But listen, Kaylie, thank you so much for joining me on this video, and look forward to having you on some more NYRA Bets videos in the future.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for watching along with this Can Thorpedo Anna win video. And make sure to press that like and subscribe button. For Kaylie Shapiro, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races, friends, and reminding you that it's now post time.